Hello everyone and welcome to this video going through chapter 5 and 6 of Frankenstein. Obviously in the last video we looked at Victor's motives for creating and the kind of nature of his work, and now we're going to do some analysis on the actual creation itself and the aftermath of that creation. Remember, you've got your books to annotate and highlight. There's not a lot of room to write around those, so remember you've got those kind of grids as well that you can be filling in with what Mary Shelley's trying to do, a summary of the chapter, how she does it, key quotations and key words you can analyse from there, and also links to context. And remember, context is never just a little one-line history lesson, it's always a kind of linking into big ideas about what and why Shelley does what she does. So we're on chapter 5 then. Chapter 5 would be a perfect, we're on page 45 as well, sorry, a perfect extract for you to get in the exam. I believe it has come up a couple of times, so it might not be the one that you end up getting, but it's quite a good one to remember some short quotations from, and it's also one, as you can see, where there's plenty to talk about as well. It was on a dreary night of November. So this is Victor the creation. It's finally done. Dreary night of November, with an anxiety that almost amounted to agony. Remember, we're talking about Victor's mental and psychological state here. In the end of chapter 4, you know, he's kind of anxious, he's nervous, he's shunning humanity here as well. And this almost amounts to agony, so it's almost physical pain with his anxiety. But you've got to question, is that anxiety because he's worried about being punished for what he's done, or is it actually that, you know, is he anxious in the way we might be anxious, you know, about something good going to happen? Is he anxious that actually the creature's going to kind of work and bring him his fame and glory? My candle was nearly burnt out. You know, he's talking about a physical candle in his laboratory, but it's quite a nice metaphor for his psychological and physical state here as well. You know, his candle's nearly burnt out. He is nearly kind of exhausted. He's nearly killing himself really to create this creature. And finally he saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. A convulsive motion agitated its limbs. It's not good and beautiful description of the creature here. You know, it's not a proud father looking down on his kind of son, his child, his creation in a happy way. It's a dull yellow eye. It's a wretch with yellow skin, the work of muscles and arteries, and the good things, you know, the lustrous black hair. I mean, I'd love to have lustrous black hair. Teeth of pearly whiteness, again, I'd love to have those. You know, the two good things about the creature's appearance are actually negatives, because they form a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes, you know, his dun white sockets, dun being kind of pale white colour, and his shriveled complexion and straight black lips. So there is some beauty in this creature, and it's interesting, you know, this kind of whiteness of his teeth. Could that represent a kind of a whiteness of his soul potentially? Is that a bit of a jump maybe? This idea the creature is born as a morally good character, as John Locke mentions a tabula rasa, a blank slate of whiteness, and kind of that's what, you know, humans are when they're born, and we project as part of their upbringing, as part of their nurture, all the negative aspects of their personality on them. But either way, the creature's described being hideously ugly, and he's actually called a catastrophe by Victor. You know, this catastrophe, a wretch. So straight away, the word wretch, which we know is repeated many, many times throughout Frankenstein. Victor is bitterly disappointed by the creation of his creature. You know, beautiful, great God, and great God's quite a nice quotation. Here it's an exclamation. You know, Victor is disappointed by his creation, almost angry, you know, almost blaspheming against God here. Is he angry with God for somehow, you know, is God limiting his work? And there's some deeper themes you can work in. Does Victor think of himself as some kind of God, you know, and he's just failed with this experiment? Is he kind of angry with himself here? But there's a lot to get out of that quotation. Unable to endure the aspect to Victor, I rushed out of the room. So Victor leaves the room, leaves his creature, because he can't cope. And then he kind of, you know, he passes out in a fit of nervousness, and he has some vivid dreams. He dreams Elizabeth. As I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arms. And there's a lot to unpack here as well. So he's walking down, he dreams that he kisses Elizabeth. He's delighted and surprised, obviously, after what's happened. First of all, this could be seen as foreshadowing Elizabeth's death, because, you know, ultimately this dream creature becomes a corpse, admittedly of his dead mother. Then you've got, is this Mary Shelley perhaps criticising this idea that Elizabeth as a woman, she's promised to Victor, she has no escape. Is it almost a punishment for Victor that actually, you know, you as a man in a patriarchal society can't decide that she's yours to keep, Elizabeth, you know, and you will be punished for this with her death in this dream, and also, you know, with her death that's foreshadowed later on as well. And we've got, I suppose, you know, Victor desires Elizabeth as well. And you've got this kind of idea of the Oedipus complex. Freud, a psychologist, comes up with the Oedipus complex, which is basically this idea that male children have some kind of deep-rooted attraction to their mother figures. And Victor certainly, you know, this is something that affects him earlier on in the novel when his mother dies, but also with this idea that his mother is promising him a you know, a pretty present in the form of Elizabeth as well. It's kind of, it's not a conventional mother-son relationship, let's put it that way. And this idea that is this almost some kind of, you know, dying desire for his mother going there as well, and that's something that's quite difficult to understand at GCSE. That's more a kind of an A-level and university level theory, but there's a lot going on in this image, and if nothing else, it's a horrific image, you know, a dead mother being presented, livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and then, you know, not only this, a shroud enveloped her form, and grave worms were crawling in the folds of the flannel. So he sees Elizabeth die and then become destroyed in the way that his mother was. And then while this is going on, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I created. His jaws opened and he muttered some inarticulate sounds while a grin wrinkled on his cheeks. Obviously we've got Victor's negative feelings to the monster. You know, Victor describes the creature as a wretch and a miserable monster here. He's already called him a wretch once before, and this idea that wretch becomes what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy is an idea. If you call someone a wretch or a monster long enough, they will become a monster, and it's something we see in society with criminals. If you treat people like criminals or hooligans or thugs, they will become hooligans and criminals and thugs, and it might not happen immediately, but it will happen eventually. And this scene, his jaws opened and he muttered some inarticulate sounds while a grin wrinkled on his cheeks. This is where we have to suspend our disbelief, but the creature has just been born. He's muttering some inarticulate sounds in the way that young children do. You know, young children aren't born with the ability to speak, so they will mumble, they'll go goo goo gaga goo da 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 and all those kind of noises. And a grin wrinkled on his cheeks, and this is really quite a sad moment, I find, quite a poignant moment in Frankenstein. This grin could be a number of things. It could be a grin, let's take it on face value, you grin when you're happy. So this idea that the creature grins at Victor Frankenstein, who is his father, Victor here, in the way that a child grins at their parent. You know, it's one of those moments that parents look out for the most in their life, that first kind of smile from their child, and Victor's getting it here, and he rejects it. One hand was stretched out seemingly to detain me. You know, the creature goes to kind of hold Victor in the way a child does, to seek reassurance in the way that a newborn child does, but he's met with Victor escaping and leaving him. This grin could be something more wicked. I mean, you know, Victor has just seen this nightmarish image in a nightmare, but, and it may be kind of the creature's grinning because it's a case of, look, this is what I'm going to do to you. And it's very interesting because the grin happens later on in the novel. The exact same word, grin, is used when Elizabeth dies, and the creature has this same grin on his face, and it's the same thing. Is this a grin now? Does the creature's grin here? Is this innocence becoming kind of evil as the novel develops? But even that grin is quite an interesting quotation to remember as we go through. And finally, you know, thinking about natural details as we go through here on page 46. It's raining, it's a black and comfortless sky. You know, nature will no longer give Victor any long-term joy. He'll use it to get away from things later on in the novel, but it's a black and comfortless sky. You know, society, the weather, everything in this world is now black and comfortless to Victor as a result of what he's done. And is this some kind of punishment by God for his crimes? Victor also calls the creature my enemy later on, and obviously Clerval comes to see Victor. Victor has another nervous fit, and save me, we're on page 48. I imagine the monster sees me, I struggled furiously and fell down in a fit. And obviously Clerval doesn't know what's going on here, he doesn't understand why Victor's kind of having a fit so much, but he does look after Victor, and Victor recovers over a period of time. And of course, this is a plot device used in the Gothic, you know, Gothic heroine who's often female, almost exclusively female, given the name heroine. Victor almost plays that role here. He has a fit. He is out of time for a period of months, where he kind of doesn't really know what's going on. And this isn't a convenient way of him avoiding all responsibility. It's obviously a genuine nervous fit, but it's a plot device used by Shelley. It's this idea of, also borrowing from Gothic conventions, this idea that time in the novel isn't linear. We've got this idea of several months have passed with Victor kind of out of the picture, in bed, recovering from this fit, and all the while the creature has been rejected and moving on his life, and we see that later on as well. And then we go into chapter 6, and obviously this is the letter from Elizabeth, and this is another element of the epistolary narrative in Frankenstein, and another narrative voice, because we see things from Elizabeth's perspective here as well. There's not a lot to look here as well, but it's interesting that Elizabeth is back in Geneva, who knows nothing about what's happened in Victor's life, talks about the blue lake and snow-clad mountains. They never change, and I think our placid home and our contented hearts are regulated by the same immutable laws. In Switzerland, in Geneva, and it is one of the most beautiful parts of the world. Beautiful blue lake, snow-clad mountains, and she can enjoy this, and their family, their hearts, they're contented, are they share this joy in a way that Victor doesn't, because as we've seen earlier on, Victor is now trapped under a black and comfortless sky for the rest of his life, and that black and comfortless sky will envelop and ultimately destroy this blue lake that Geneva represents as well. So although it's quite a small and minor quotation, it's quite an interesting kind of point to note how weather is used as well. Elizabeth also kind of, it's quite a plot device. Deaths of William and Justine. Justine Moritz, of course, is the most grateful little creature in the world. She's obviously, one of the people who knew the Frankensteins, and they kind of worked as servants with the Frankensteins. And one by one, obviously, Justine's kind of family die, and Justine is left. So obviously, Justine kind of goes and returns to the Frankensteins as well. So this idea that Justine is set up as this virtuous creature, and of course we know what happens to Justine as the novel progresses, and it's a plot device really by Shelley to increase the tension, with this idea of all these kind of this beauty that's represented in Geneva is a world apart from Victor, and misery is going to befall them very soon. And William's also mentioned as well, very tall of his age, sweet laughing blue eyes, dark eyelashes and curling hair, 2 little dimples appear on each cheek, and he's almost described as some kind of cherub here, some kind of angelic creature in a way that Elizabeth was earlier on in the novel, and it just makes their deaths later on in the novel more and more kind of poignant as well. And obviously Victor, Clerval, they stay in Ingolstadt, waiting to leave for Geneva. Clerval meets the professors, and they both praise Frankenstein for his work, which is difficult for Frankenstein to hear because, of course, of what he's done, and they don't know. And Clerval, of course, while they're waiting to go, Clerval called forth the better feelings of my heart. He again taught me to love the aspect of nature and the cheerful faces of children. So Victor goes from being full of anxiety and nervousness, because he realises in the middle of his narrative that Clerval's dead here. Excellent friend, how sincerely did you love me and endeavour to elevate my mind until it was on a level with your own. So he's kind of, he's praising Clerval here as well, because Clerval has the ability to make him feel these feelings. Clerval is kind of, he's a lover of literature, and removal from the scientific world means that he can do this to Victor, but obviously his death means that there's no joy for Victor as well. And we've got the end of chapter 6, and we'll look at chapter 7 in the next video as well. Going along to Geneva, the scenes are very nice, everyone's really happy, and my own spirits were high, and I bounded along with feelings of unbridled joy and hilarity. And this is a great example of dramatic tension used by Mary Shelley. We'd probably call it a cliffhanger, but a moment of high dramatic tension is a better term, because what happens is, this chapter has been building up towards this wonderful scene of Victor, the the creature's gone, we've forgotten about him, he's recovered from his fit, he's left Ingolstadt, he can go back to Geneva where the lake is blue and there's lovely snow-capped mountains, everything's happy, and he's feeling unbridled joy and hilarity, he's feeling happy. And then, of course, the negative events start to happen in chapter 7. So it's a lovely example of building up this kind of tension and sense of dramatic irony. You know, Victor kind of thinking, oh, phew, everything's okay. You know, I don't have to worry about the creature. I don't have to worry about my family. I'm going to go and see them. And, of course, in the next chapter, we find out that William dies, and then Justine is due to follow suit when she gets executed. So complete your grid and annotate in as much detail as possible with some of these key quotations. There's some interesting references to other characters apart from Victor and the creature, particularly in chapter 6, and there's a lot about nature and how that's used in Frankenstein as well. And then in the next video we'll look at chapter 7 and 8 in a little bit more detail.